Okay, let's look at this one. I like your crown. Claude starts with d4. Okay, good move. D4 is fine. I play d5 as well. I would definitely recommend it. Um, Got resign. No worries. We don't have to end in checkmate to analyze our games. Okay. So first, you'll notice in my opening principles that I mentioned, I never said bring the queen out in the opening. It's because you should absolutely not do that. Okay? Don't move your queen. Just don't even touch it until you've accomplished the goals that I outlined. Control the center, develop your minor pieces, and castle. Just leave her where she is. She's fine. She's enjoying the view from D1 or D8. She's hanging out. Okay. And the reason for that, if I tell you these things and you listen to them, fine, you'll do well. But it's much better to know the reason why I said that. And the reason is you can very easily attack the queen when it comes out in the opening, right? So if I were to play something like this, now I'm developing my bishop and my other bishop with tempo on the queen. I've developed with tempo on the queen. We say the word tempo a lot of different ways, right? When we say developing with tempo or making a move with tempo, that means you make that move and your opponent has to do something, which is just kind of giving you time, giving you moves, right? But it also means just, your move. You're using one tempo to make one move, usually, right? So I'm developing with tempo, and that's fantastic because the opening is kind of like a race, Who can control the center first? Who can, get castled first? Create threats first. The more pieces you have developed, if your opponent's underdeveloped and you have a bunch of developed pieces, you're in a great place to attack now. And you're probably going to have a successful attack if your opponent has one developed piece and you fully developed. So that's why you don't want to bring the queen out in the opening. Or put pieces in stupid spots in the opening. Because if you do that, your opponent's going to develop with tempo. Okay. Back to the game. Played knight c6. So when your opponent plays d4, a lot of times the structures that you get, they look very similar, right? And you can kind of get tricked into um, thinking that it's always going to be the same game, and that's not entirely true. And I'll show you one of my games with d4, d5, and I'll show you the kind of thing that I usually want to go for. Really depends on what white does, what your structure is going to be. A lot of times, white here will play this move, and this is called the Queen's Gambit. Okay. And if you take here, that's the Queen's Gambit accepted. If you don't take, you play something like this. It's called the Queen's Gambit declined. Okay. I always decline the Queen's Gambit personally, but okay. Back to here's developing. Perfect. I have no complaint. The only thing about putting knights on these squares, and it varies by opening whether you care about this or not. Because putting knights on these squares is really great. They control all four center squares. Awesome. But when you put a knight in front of a pawn, the pawn can't go forwards. So in these positions, I really like to put my pawn on c5 there. But that depends on the opening, and it's, that's not how everyone likes to play also. So this is a completely fine move. Developing, doesn't matter. Anyways, I'd want to get this bishop out soon as well. But the queen here actually kind of makes it difficult, because where I'd love to put this bishop is on f5. Obviously, that's covered. So the idea I did earlier, it's pretty good, actually. Putting the pawn there, supporting the bishop, so I can put the bishop here, right? With tempo on the queen even. And then the next move, I can put my my dark square bishop on g7. When you put your bishop right here, any of these moves, the act of doing that is called Fiancadoing your bishop. Fiancadoing. Okay. And that's good, because putting your bishops there, let's look at this bishop, because that's what I was talking about in the example. From this square, it controls the longest diagonal possible for a bishop of that color, right? The dark square bishop, this is the longest dark diagonal. These ones are one square shorter than this one. Okay. So that's fantastic. You love having your bishop there. They control more squares in the center of the board, right? Because we're kind of looking 4 ways instead of, 1 pretty much. So they do control more squares in the center, but they also can kind of get kicked around in the center, especially by pawns. So these are really good squares for your bishops. They're very good squares. So that's called Fiancadoing. So in this position, I would probably actually go for that right away. Here, put this back where it fucking belongs. And then I go here, And this is great, because now I got these really strong bishops. They're not looking at the king side, so my opponent's probably going to cast the king side and be safe over here, but that's still a lot of pressure on the queen side. Can win some material. So back to the game. But this is a good move too. Like I said, just developing. So that's what we're trying to do. Control the center, develop. I'm spending a lot of time in the beginning of this game, sorry. Okay. So your opponent's pawn is protected by the queen, and so is ours. Okay. This move really accomplished nothing. It really. Please don't play that move. So okay, these pawns are both attacked once and defended once, but they're defended by the second worst defender on the board. Okay. Your king's the worst defender, because if a piece is attacked more than once and it gets taken, your king can't take it, right? You always want to take with the least valuable piece first. And you want to take with the most valuable piece last, so that you have the most valuable piece at the end of all these exchanges, right? So, okay. Let's count attackers and defenders on this pawn. There's 2 attackers and 2 defenders. When I take with this pawn, you have to take with the pawn if you're going to take this pawn back. Because if you take with the queen, right, even though at the end you were the last one to take, you lost your queen. You lost material. So you always want to take with the least valuable piece first, so that at the end you have your most valuable piece left. Okay. So hopefully not offending anybody with these lines. I am just illustrating. Is this the game? Did you actually play this? Knight takes e5. Wait, you did? That's funny. Go Yuso. Okay. And that's a fine move. You are attacking the center, right? 1 defender, and there are now 2 attackers, right? So, taking is definitely an option. When they take like this, that uncorks a discovered attack on the d5 pawn. So actually, when they do this, and it looks like they did in the game, now you'd like to take back, right? This pawn was defended, and so you said, okay, I can play e5. But this tactic of a discovered attack, you're actually losing a pawn at the end of that, right? Because now if you take here, which is what happened in the game, your opponent played a weird intermezzo for no reason. Your opponent played a really bad move, actually. So your opponent played queen b5 check. And the queen that you are, Yuso, you found the correct move, which is c6, defending the pawn and winning a tempo on the queen, right? So now, if knight takes, you're not going to take the knight. Okay, first of all, knight takes. Can you take the knight? No, you can't take the knight. This is not a legal move. It won't let me do it because your pawn is pinned to the king. Your pawn's pinned to the king. First of all. Second of all, okay, so this square was defended twice, and they attacked it. Okay, so a good instinct would be to take back. That is perfectly fine. If you took in the game between 2-300s, if that line happened, and I was like your coach, I would not be upset about that. You won a piece. Your opponent blundered, and you took the piece. Go Yuso. You're up a piece, right? However, it's good to, keep your eyes open and realize you can take the queen in this position. That's much better. It's much, much better. Okay. Now you're up a queen. Anyways. Okay. Whoop. Back to this position, though. Your opponent should not have played queen b5 check. As I said, that was a very bad move. What they should have done is take this pawn, because this pawn's hanging. Because of that discovered attack when they took on d5, or on e5, excuse me. Okay. And you're just losing the pawn. So, that doesn't matter. Okay. I almost just lied to you straight up. I was going to say it doesn't matter which way they take the pawn. But the knight's attacking their queen. Okay. So, the only move that's good for your opponent here is to take with the queen. Okay. Attacking your knight, which is hanging with check. Attacking your queen, which could only be taken back with the king, which would lose you your right to castle. Right? You can only castle if your king and the rook that you're castling with have both not moved. There's nothing between them, and none of the squares that the king passes through, including the one that it's starting on, none of those squares are attacked. Those are the rules for castling. If you can't castle, it's because one of those rules is broken. Okay, so black has a few moves here. I would definitely take, but I am a low-level player. You don't have to take this queen. You don't have to take it. All you have to do is defend this knight. That's it. Okay? Now, if we were to defend the knight like this, for example, you do have to be careful, though. Because if they made a move like this, now the knight's pinned to your king, And let's pretend for a second that we cannot attack this queen in any way. Well, we don't have to. It's pretend it's true, actually. We actually can't attack this queen in any way. um, okay. It's reality. So we make some other move, you know, which continues to leave this knight pinned. Then they can play this move, right? So the knight cannot move. Nothing can defend a knight against a pawn, because the pawn is the least valuable thing, right? Now this knight is dead. There's no way to save this knight. You have to make some other intermediate move, basically. So that's a pattern to look out for. If your pieces are pinned to the king or even the queen most of the time, and a pawn attacks them, they're dead. Unless you can find an in-between move which works out of it, or trades or something. Okay. So just teaching patterns there. All right, back to the game. Yeah, they played this. Not taking the pawn. That was hung. Okay. I don't hate e5 when you played it, by the way. That's a tactic. It is a tactic, and you're not gonna see tactics other than by experience or by really closely analyzing, right? So do tactics, that's a tactic that you missed in a rapid game, so okay. You need to do more tactics, but you've just started out. It's fine. Just do tactics, do puzzles. That's all. So, and you'll learn those patterns, and you'll know them. Chess is a lot of memorization, but it's not always memorization of openings and moves. That's not the kind of memorization that matters at a lower level. It's pattern recognition and memorization. That's important at low levels. Okay. Played this. Your opponent went back. Yeah, got to make some move, right? Can't hang the queen. What'd you do next? Good. Perfect. Develop your pieces. I have no complaint with that. That is... Whoa! 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 Coming out here with f4. Okay, so another very important lesson. And you may have heard this before. There's actually a book titled this by Sam Shankland, a prominent U.S. grandmaster. Pawns don't move backwards. Okay? Yeah, of course they don't. Why do you mention it? So when you make a move like f4, you're leaving behind all the squares that this pawn could have covered before it moved forward, okay? I'm going to go and move back. Okay, this f pawn is covering these two squares. Yeah? And let's pretend for a minute that I played f3. Okay, we're looking at these two squares now. But when we go f4, we can never protect these squares with this pawn again. They're left behind, okay? These squares are weakened now permanently by the absence of the f-pawn. Okay, so especially on the king side, especially in the opening, we don't like to weaken the king side. We don't like to move these pawns really much at all. I don't recommend moving these pawns until you're castled, and even then, until the end game, I only recommend h3. Okay. Start there with that advice. So, okay, f4. Knight's hanging. Okay. So, move the knight. Very logical response, and you needed to move it. Another move. I'm not saying it's a good move, but another move. It actually This is not a good move, but I'm just wanting to display the term. Um, let's say that you played d4 instead, attacking this knight, right? If they take your knight, you'll take this knight. Obviously, this kind of doesn't work because then on the next move they can also take this knight. But pretend that this knight's not there, okay? It would just be a trade. Sure. That's called an in-between move, right? Something of yours is hanging or some threat exists. And you can play this move and kind of delay the threat by one move, right? It's called an in-between move. In Italian, that's called an intermezzo. And in German, that's called a Zwischenzug. And unfortunately, all three of those terms are popularly used by people of every language, and you need to know all three of them. Okay. In between move, intermezzo, Zwischenzug. Okay. Glad that we got that out of the way. And that's an important concept. It is. Other kinds of intermezzos, for example, are a check, right? If white attacked your piece like this, and you were able to give a check, you can't in this position, but pretend that you could. Actually, you can, but it's with the piece that's attacked, so that's not a perfect example. If you give a check, they can't take your piece the next move. They have to get out a check. You know, that's the rules. That's not optional. That's another example of an intermezzo. Okay. So what happened next is you moved your knight here, and I do not like this move all that much because you're leaving it where it can be attacked again by some pawns, right? It's protected by a piece, so if a piece were to attack it, no piece is going to attack it right now, but if a piece were to attack it, you don't really care, right? Okay, we're going to trade, right? If this guy could take this on this move, right, you'd just take back, and that's a trade. That's fine. But if a pawn can attack it, then you're unhappy, right? And that brings me to another concept, which is loading pieces. I would probably play this move. The reason for that being I want to keep these bishops open. Ooh, that's a bad one. I want to let the bishops come out. I don't want to block any in. If I played here, this bishop wouldn't be able to go out this way. This knight can move eventually, or the bishop could come out this way, right? But just if you're asking me the move I would play knight to g6. Okay. But okay, you play knight g4 and they play h3 like I said, and then you go back. All right, so knight on the edge, like we said, not the best. But that was your only move, not to hang the knight. So. Oh, also, yeah. Another thing was that this move actually attacks the pawn. It is defended once, but you're adding pressure to it. Anyways, okay, we're here now. Okay. All right. So this is not a good move because they just willingly put their knight on the edge. Um, I can only assume that he's trying to get his knight over to this square in the center. But that's covered by a bishop at the moment, so that's just a bad move. I won't comment on your opponent's bad moves. Okay, we'll be here all day if I comment on your opponent's bad moves by the looks of it. Okay, bishop, very good, developing, and putting pressure on the b2 square. But what's wrong with this move? I'll give a second. Anybody can answer this. Um, what's unfortunate about this move? I don't know is an okay answer. Because I'll tell you. And I'll show you no matter what people answer. But people shakes probably, and I don't know. But I'll give you a little bit to think about it. And I will say, what was this bishop doing on c8? What was it doing? You're dying, just tell. Okay. This bishop was defending this pawn, right? So now, moving the bishop away, this pawn's actually attacked. So that's hanging, and that's a pretty safe pawn to take, because you can get out. The queen's slippery, you know? Yeah. So, that's all. And the reason that I bring it up and make such a big deal out of it is that that's a very, very, very common pattern. That happens all the time. It happens to me still. Okay. You have to remember that your bishop's guarding this pawn. If we go back to the starting position, you look, all of these pawns are guarded. They're all protected. Okay? This one's protected like this. This one's protected like this. This one's protected by the king. This one's protected 3 times. This one's protected 4 times. I miscounted. This is also protected 4 times. This one's protected by the queen. This one's protected by the bishop. And this one's protected by the rook. Okay? So all the pawns are protected, but you'll notice these ones are only protected once. Whereas the rest are protected. Sorry, these ones are only protected once. The middle ones are very well protected, but the rest you have to be mindful. If you move their protector, they'll be undefended. Unless there's another thing protecting them at that point in time. Okay, so but if you imagine that your knight was still on b8 and the opponent took, now your rook's hanging, right? Unless you move the knight. Because it's not defended by the queen, because the knight's there. So that's another very common pattern. And that's going to lose you a lot of games at a low level, I can promise you that. Or win you a lot of games. If you remember what I just said, and you don't let it happen to you, it's going to win you a lot of games. And not lose you a lot of games. So, okay. Didn't take, no worries. And they actually... this is check. Okay. This is check. I missed that it was check. They did undefend this pawn, though, with this move. Okay, so now if I see this move, and I'm black, I'm waiting to grab this pawn. Your primary objective should not be grabbing pawns. Because in the end, especially below like 1000 on Chess.com, the game's going to be decided by hung pieces, not by hung pawns. Okay, so even going into an endgame like up 3 pawns, that's not always decisive. That's not always decisive in my games, even depending on the time control. So, okay, but it's check, so you can't take that pawn either. Blocking check, nice. And that knight there on e4 cannot be pestered by pawns, right? We talked about that. Look at f4 is coming back to bite your opponent, right? It left this square behind. And the d-pawn is gone. So this knight can never be attacked by a pawn. And this is another... I'm dumping the terminology on you right now. I'm so sorry. But hopefully you'll remember some of it. This knight, when it cannot be attacked by a pawn ever on that square and it's protected by a pawn, that's called an outpost. Okay, that's another key term. You could never touch that knight again this entire game. And the only thing that could take it is another knight, but that's just a trade because you take back with the pawn. Well, another knight or a bishop, right? But that's just a trade. You don't lose material by that. Okay? So that's an outpost. And that I don't. Okay. So you blocked the check with the knight. You also blocked your bishop from seeing this pawn. Okay. So I probably would not have chosen that move, but having an outpost is very, very good. Very good. What would I have done? Okay. So remember how I talked about the opening being a race, right? You want to get developed as fast as possible, faster than your opponent, etc. Okay. So one of the concepts with that is that you don't want to move the same piece over and over again, right? If you're moving one knight 3 times, then you're taking the one move that it took to develop it, and then you're taking another 2 moves where you could have developed 2 more pieces in those moves, right? So that's bad. You don't want to move one piece multiple times in the opening. So you're taking this knight, which you've already moved, and you're putting it here now, which, it's great. It's got an outpost. You're blocking the check. I mean, you got to do something to block the check. So this is a good move on the surface, but not really in this position, I'd say, right? I would develop another piece to block the check, probably with this move. I think I would play there. Bishop e7. Connecting, my king, my rook, and getting ready to castle. Another move that's very possible is queen e7, offering a queen trade. Notice how both of the queens are, defended, right? So neither of them are hanging. And in this position, really, neither side should take the opponent's queen, because if they do, that's giving your opponent a move to develop. You're developing for free. Here, white spent a move to take the queen, and black says, okay, I'll take that move. And now I've developed one more piece. I've developed all my minor pieces, and I'm ready to castle, right? That would be great for black. If black could play queen e7, knowing that white would take, black would play it every game. But white shouldn't take, right? And in this position, white should do something else, develop. Play like here so you can Fiancado. Right, okay. So, but I think this is the best move. But in the game we played this, which, like I said, good and bad for different reasons. Your opponent develops their knight. I like that move a lot. Developing a bishop with check. So I like that it's with check. Oh, their knight was hanging. No, it wasn't. Never mind. I like that this move is with check, because that's a tempo, right? That's what we were talking about earlier. But the only thing is that they could play c3 here and block the check and even win a tempo back by attacking your bishop, which they do. Another move here would be knight. Woo, knight c3. It'd be a great move because this knight's doing fuck all on the side of the board. And then another move could be bishop d2 or knight d2. These are all good moves. I mean, probably, honestly, this is the worst move, c3. But the redeeming factor of the move is that it wins a tempo on the bishop. But if you put a pawn on c3, you can't put any other pieces on c3, and that's a really good square. And for that reason, I would play knight c3. I'd get this knight off the fucking back rank, or not the back rank, but the edge of the board. That's what I would prefer in this position, or this, to develop a piece. Okay. They played t3, which is a fine move, but definitely not the best move by far in the position. Castles, I love it. Perfect. Absolutely love that. And now that knight's unpinned. Wait, what the fuck am I talking about? I don't love castles because it hangs a bishop. Don't love it because it hangs a bishop. They take the bishop. Okay. Um, Good move by your opponent. In concept, I loved castling, right? Okay, but all right. So you saw your knight is no longer pinned. Assuming you saw the pin in the first place. Great. And we are attacking the rook, right? Um, you're actually forking the rook and the bishop. Okay, they're both protected. That's not true. The rook's not protected, but the rook can move. Okay, bishop's protected by the rook and by the king. Okay, but if they move the rook, they can't castle on that side. So I really like knight g3 because they can't take it. Um, you're threatening to win the exchange. Remember I said that earlier. Trading your knight for their rook, and actually you would just be winning a rook. Um, but if your knight's ever on h1 as black, you can kind of assume that they're gonna take it back eventually. You know, it's very tough to dig it out of h1, but it's possible. Possible. Okay, they move the rook. Good. Yeah, I probably would have played that move too, because now the rook's defended by the knight on f3. Rook g1 was also an option. So now they can't castle kingside. They have to castle queenside, if at all. I'm assuming they just don't castle in this game. I probably wouldn't castle. Yeah, it looks like they don't. Because there's not much safety on the queen side either. They've moved their pawns so much, so their pawn structure is very weak. And your pawn structure, on the other hand, Yuso, is fantastic. Your pawns are very healthy. There's no pawn islands. Your pawns all have neighbors. Okay. Your pawns are supporting each other. Your pawns are close to your king, protecting it. Just need to make some room here for the king so you don't get back ranked. But other than that, looking good. Your development is way ahead of your opponent. Both of you have these silly knights on the edge, on the rim, but hopefully they'll make it back to civilization sometime. And you've got all your major pieces connected on the back rank. Hopefully you move the queen off soon. It is stuck. This knight can't go to any squares other than g4, which is protected by a pawn, right? So the easiest way to get this knight out would be to like play bishop back in here. Another idea, it does two things in one, is here, f6, because now you're creating luft and you're creating a square for the knight. However, f6 and f3 are not really great moves when you're castle kingside, because when you're here, this whole diagonal is open, right? You can get some checks or some even scarier threats. So I would move the bishop and get the knight in that way. But anyways, what happened in the game? Took the bishop. Okay, so now they take back with the king, I assume, and now they can never castle, and that's good for you, right? The king is a bit unsafe. This rook is just very silly where it is right now. Now that the king is in the way on the back rank, right? It can't reroute this way. The king's in the way now. Okay. So it looks very good for you, except for the fact that you're down a piece. Okay. And that brings me to 2 points. Number 1, when you're down material, you don't want to trade, because the more pieces that are on the board, the less you feel the fact that you're down material, and also the more complex the game can be, and you can maybe win material back. If the position's complex, then it's easier to blunder. It's easier to miss tactics, stuff like that. So you do want to keep material on the board when you're down material. Secondly, when your opponent is not able to castle, or just if the king's unsafe in any way, you also want to keep material on the board, because then you have more things to attack it with, right? If you're attacking, you don't want to trade as much. So when their opponent's king is very vulnerable, you want to be attacking, hopefully. And then you don't want to trade pieces. Um, there's some sacrificing ideas at a high level, but you don't want to think about that right now. Definitely not. Okay, I like this move. Getting your rook to an open file, and it's in the center, and you're winning a tempo on the queen. Perfect. You can't take this; it's protected. Awesome, awesome. It's a great move. Um, without having moved any of these pawns, this is a little bit of a scary move. Sometimes, right now, it's fine. It's very safe right now. But having this rook here also prevents you from getting back rank mated. Because unless they can get many, pieces on the back rank, unless they can get both rooks and a queen on your back rank, uh, if they take right here, they're not going to checkmate you. Because they can't. Yeah. Incredible route. But in this position, this is perfectly fine. This is very good. Um, very good move. Winning a tempo on the queen, developing your rook further. Great. Okay, put the queen back on b3 like it was earlier. The stupid fucking queen. How many moves has your opponent moved their queen this game? Let me count. One. Let me walk through the game. Actually, that's a better way to count. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, we haven't gotten this far. 5 moves already, and it's move 16. That's terrible, and that's why you don't bring your queen out in the opening. 5 moves out of the first 16 moves. That's almost a third of the moves. They're not developing other pieces. They still have this stupid bishop, this stupid rook, this stupid rook. Exactly, Gav. Hello. Good to see you. um, but you don't want to. You really don't want to do that. um, so yeah. Hey, I can teach everybody, Yuso. Leave Gav alone. Gav's welcome. Okay? So let's look at what we want to do in this position. Let's think about the objectives that I talked about. Opening principles. Control the center with your pawns and with your minor pieces. Develop your minor pieces. Check and check. This knight's a little stupid on h6, but it's technically not on its starting square. Sure. That knight's taken quite a journey, actually, from b8. Castle, check. We have one of our rooks on an open file. Fantastic. So what haven't we done? We have not connected our rooks, and we've not created space for our king. Created Luft for our king. So, what would I play here? Maybe, bishop g6, like I talked about earlier. Getting this knight back in the game. Or maybe even something like bishop e4, threatening to double their pawns. Or maybe bishop e6, threatening a discovered attack on the queen. Sure. Lots of ideas. I think this bishop moving is probably the best thing, just to get the knight back in the game. Because I want to create Luft. I don't really want to move this pawn. This one can be good sometimes, but I really want to do this one in this game. When you are making an escape square for your king, making space, making Luft, you want that square of space that you make to be safe, right? So in this position, your opponent only has one bishop, and it's a dark square bishop. So when you make this free square for the king, you want it to be a light square, so the dark square bishop can't touch it. Okay, so that's why in this position, G6 would not be the move I choose to create space for my king. I would rather play H6 so that the square is a light square. Right. So I would probably do some maneuver like this to make space for my king. Okay. And I'd probably do that right away. So anyways, and after all those opening things are done, that's when we want to start pushing pawns, making pawn breaks, trying to like queen and or attack. Okay. So all right, b5, attacking the knight. It's kind of just like a one move threat, and you're giving him the tempo. You're losing a tempo by doing this move, right? And forcing him to move that knight. So you're basically you're giving your opponent a free turn to get this knight off the side of the board and improve it. So it's a weird move. Not my favorite move. And so knight c5. Looks fine to me. I probably would have played knight c3 back here. But that knight's really restricted by these pawns. So I can see knight c5. Maybe I like knight c5 better on second look here. And those are the only two moves. I mean, these squares are bad. So yeah, knight c5 looks pretty good. There's actually nothing that can really touch it. Yeah. So this is another outpost like I was talking about. Like your knight was on e4. This is an outpost for this knight. Another reason why playing b5 wasn't great, right? You're leaving these squares behind, like I was talking about earlier. Okay, a5. Very, very aggressive on the queen side today. All right, just looking to trade off this b4 pawn, I suppose. Removing the outpost from the knight. So there's something to be said for that. Like I said, though, I really want to get this knight better. I want to connect my rooks. Something like that. Eventually. There's a lot of one-move threats in this game. Okay, I hate the move g4. I really, really hate that move because this king is so vulnerable right now. So vulnerable. G4 improves this rook, right? It's easier for the rook to get out, but oh my gosh, like this king, queens are on the board, and look at all this free space around the king. That's very scary for white. I really don't like that for white. Okay. I definitely would not do this. This is a sacrifice, we'll call it, of the knight. Okay, for 2 pawns. So it's almost an even trade, right? If you think about what a knight's worth, 3 pawns. Taking 2 pawns for it. It was a really bad knight on the side of the board like this, right? And it's actually very close to being trapped. It's not actually going to be trapped. But if you can imagine a world where this, right, only has this square. Luckily it has this square. So I can really see what you're going for. I don't hate this move, really. I don't love it, but I don't hate it because not only is there all this space around the king, but now also its defenders, the pawns. They're not distant, they're gone. Okay? So now if you can get your queen in there somehow, or get your rooks, more activated, this is pretty scary. But again, right now already you're down a piece. So I said we don't really want to trade when we're down a piece, but sacrifice when we're down a piece. You'd better have a checkmate calculated already. If you're going to sack a piece, especially in a long game, you need to sit there and think for a long time. Is there a forcing line that leads to checkmate or winning this material back? Otherwise, it should not be played. And I notice that you're thinking in this game. It's move 18, and you've thought for a little over 7 minutes out of your 30 minutes, which is good. I mean, if you're playing with opening theory in mind, This is a good amount of time to have thought. I'm going to assume that you don't have that much opening theory, especially in this line that your opponent chose. So I would like to think for a bit longer in this early game. Um, these moves are fine. Move the rook. Oh, oh, good thing. I'm not going to pretend like I saw this. Um, the rook is defended by the queen. I'm not sure what you're saying is a fork, Gav. Oh, yeah, here. I was looking at this as well. Yeah, yeah. I was looking at knight b7, um, forking these two. And that just wins an exchange, like we were talking about earlier. Um, so here, it might be better to take with the queen. Um, but honestly, it's not all that important to be playing on the queen side at all right now. You've sacked a piece on the king side to crack open the king, so I think right now I'm thinking about how to uh, how to move forward with an attack. Unfortunately, this knight does a really good job of keeping the queen from coming in. You can't put anything here because it's very much controlled. Yeah, I struggle to see how to move forward with an attack. Um, but okay, we play on the queen side. We don't see the fork. This is still a fork, by the way. It didn't go away. And it doesn't go away. It's still there. It's still the best move, probably. Okay, we hang the major exchange, which is what we call the difference between a rook and a queen. Love it. Go Yuso, seeing that it's protected. Now we play knight b7, which is a one move threat against the queen, and nothing else. Okay. Um, a6 is not really a good square for the queen, I'd say. Um, for a couple reasons. One, it's not really looking anywhere. It's kind of locked in by the pawns. And another thing is, and this is a pattern to recognize, when you're one square diagonal from a knight like this, the knight can attack in one move, right? Squares where the knight cannot attack in one move are directly next to it but not diagonal, and two squares diagonal. Okay. Another square would be that. Three squares ahead, I suppose. Um, is a square where it cannot be attacked in one move. And some of these squares that I listed can be attacked in two moves, but some of them you need, like, for example, the two squares diagonal, you literally need three moves to attack. If this knight wanted to attack this square, we'd have to go, like, here. Sorry, I'm stupid. Here and here. Three moves, and now it's attacking. So, just patterns. So I'd like to put the queen right next to the knight. I'd probably play here. And now the queen's looking in this way. You know, I could drop back and attack the pawn or something. That's where I would put the queen. All right, and then they play, yeah, like I was saying. But now this knight is, we're kind of x-raying through the knight, right? Like, first of all, the knight's hanging. The knight needs to move or be protected. And I would protect it, by the way. Very much. Very much would do that. But if it moves, right, now we're looking in here with our queen. We got to set the semblance of an attack now, whereas before we did not. Yeah, it's another way to protect it. Tell me why that's bad. It's hanging. Okay. Go Yuso. Bringing the hurt on your opponent. You're ahead material now. um, Ahead by 3 points of material. So it's you have an equal number of pieces. Oh wait. No, you still have one fewer piece than your opponent. But you have a queen instead of a Oh, you have a queen and two pawns. That's it. That's it. Instead of rook and a minor piece. So, yep, yep. All right. Attacking your queen again, hanging another piece, which you did not take. Gotta watch that. But you did not hang a queen, which is good. Attacking your bishop. Do you see it now? Kind of. Gav, I do have to say these are 20 minutes, not 20 seconds on the clock. It's plenty of time to see a hanging piece. Um, in one move at least. Oh, he's making fun of you. Never mind. I get it. So, funny enough, so this move is kind of inviting you to move the bishop, right? Um, but you found another move, which was it may have been because you played this queen move, right? And you wanted to take the knight, and he didn't defend it, so you said, okay, I'm going to take it. That's possible. But the thing is, taking this knight with the queen actually also defends the bishop, so it's just as good as having taken with the bishop. All right, attacking the rook. I like that move. I like that move. Getting the king off the back rank and letting this rook come around. You still have not made any luft, Yuso. So a lot of the times it's very easy to just react to your opponent's last move. But on moves like when you played b5, when you played a5, those aren't really forced moves. We got to be thinking about getting our king a little bit more safe before we play moves like that. All right, backed up, good. Your opponent's really bad at looking at where the queen moves, for sure. Okay, rook e1, takes a pawn, sure. We need to make luft. We are crushing here. We've got so many more pawns and so many, we've got the queen instead of a knight. All right, Rob, have a good day. Good afternoon to you, and I hope you have a good one. Yes, Gav, absolutely. Because when if a rook finds its way to your back rank, uh, it's too late, you know. Um, but okay, you're saying okay, I'll just see a back rank threat, right, when it comes. That's easy to say, but it's hard to do. You get surprised a lot. You really do, especially even including my rating, at 1200, 1300. Very easy to miss things, for sure. Um, and so that's why I'm saying critical part of the opening, um, basically as soon as you castle, um, you need to make space for your king. So when I'm in a crushing position like this, and I have not created any space, I'm sweating, like looking at this. Yes, absolutely, preventing. Thinking ahead of time is very important in chess. So I'm sweating, right? Because you worked for this whole game, you've got this great advantage. And in a couple moves, you might not even see it. Bang. Whoops. Bang. And the game is over. And you not only didn't win, but you lost. Like that's ooh, rough. So yeah, as I was saying, I'm sweating right now. Like I really I'm begging you to make room. Um wait. Is this where you resigned? Did your opponent resign here? It says game may have continued. I'm guessing this is where they resigned. Um, but okay. In the end game, when there's the queens are off the board at a minimum, and maybe there's like one or two rooks, like in like two or less minor pieces, okay? Call it the end game. You want your king to be active. Your king is so useful in end games. So if material is roughly even here, pretend this isn't here, and drop a couple of pawns off the board. This king is doing nothing back here. This king is very passive. This king is somewhat active, right? If I'm white in this position, I'm going to hustle my king over and take these 2 pawns, and I'm going to make a queen on this side. Or even just take one of these pawns and make a queen. Or even not even do that and just march a pawn. So let's actually, here, let's do that. Here, let's say we just go here, okay? Or wait, not even, okay. Let's just look at it from this move. Ooh. White wants to make a queen, right? That's the purpose of this move. So if black takes, then this pawn can go. This is called a passed pawn. When no pawns can take it, right? None of your pawns can do anything about this pawn queening. That's called a passed pawn. Right. So that's the idea, right? So you can't take this. Yeah? But also, if you don't take it, white's going to move it forward. So you have to be very, very careful when your pawns are kind of hanging off the edge like this, because this can become a passed pawn very easily. Very easily. It's already promising to become one. So in this position, other than the rook hanging, here, let's take this like I was supposed to. Say I go here. With a rook on the board, you can take this. Absolutely. If you're a rook up, by the way, in an endgame, trade as much as fucking possible. As much as possible. Because you can checkmate with a rook and just a rook and your king. That's a win. You can checkmate like that.